Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're taking a look at From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks.
Yeah, a fascinating look at how we can kind of approach the second half of life with purpose.
Yeah, avoiding that striver's curse, as Brooks calls it.
Right, and I think this is really for anyone who has achieved, that professional success, but still feels like something's missing.
Definitely. And Brooks argues that a lot of these high achievers, they hit a wall as they get older. Their success, the success they had in their younger years, driven by fluid intelligence, starts to kind of plateau.
Yeah, and that can be a real shock.
Especially for those people who have kind of built their identity around that achievement.
Yeah, Brooks actually uses himself as an example.
Oh, really?
He was a successful classical musician touring internationally.
Wow.
But in his late 20s, he started realizing his musical skills were declining. He even tried to make a comeback.
Oh, no.
It didn't work out.
So what did he do?
Well, he eventually gave up music.
Okay.
But at first, he really tried to force things.
I can see that.
Which just led to more frustration, and I think this is something that happens a lot with people who are used to success coming easily.
Yeah.
They hit that wall, and their first instinct is to just push harder, work longer, try to regain that lost edge.
But it sounds like you're saying that's not the answer.
It's like swimming upstream.
Yeah.
Exhausting and ultimately futile.
So what is the answer?
Well, Brooks realized that he needed to shift gears.
Okay.
He went back to school, got his PhD,
Wow.
and found a new path in academia, and this really led him to explore this difference between fluid and crystallized intelligence.
So it's not that we get dumber, it's that our strengths evolve.
Exactly. Fluid intelligence that peaks when we're young. It's about quick thinking, adaptability, processing new information,
Yeah.
like, a young chess prodigy.
Right.
You can just kind of intuitively see those moves. But as we get older, our strengths shift more towards crystallized intelligence.
That knowledge you've accumulated.
Skills, experience, all of that built up over a lifetime.
And I imagine that shift is particularly relevant for, knowledge workers.
Absolutely. Brooks uses Benjamin Jones's research on Nobel Prize winners.
Interesting.
And Jones found that scientists tend to make their biggest discoveries in their late 30s when fluid intelligence is still high. But they go on to have these long and fulfilling careers long after that because of their crystallized intelligence.
So instead of trying to compete with our younger colleagues on, speed and agility, we can focus on what we do bring to the table.
Right. Our experience, our wisdom, that deep understanding of our fields.
Makes me think of like a seasoned surgeon. They might not be as quick with a scalpel as they were in their younger years, but they have that experience.
They've seen it all, countless variations and complications, and that gives them this unparalleled expertise and judgment.
They become mentors and teachers.
Absolutely sharing that hard-won knowledge with the next generation.
It makes me think of Chip Conley, the hotel entrepreneur who ended up mentoring the founders of Airbnb. He wasn't a tech expert, but he had all that experience in navigating the business world.
And that was so valuable.
He became their modern elder.
I love that Conley's story shows how we can actually leverage our crystallized intelligence to find new purpose.
Yeah.
New value in this second half of life, recognizing our strengths have evolved and being willing to adapt.
Okay, so we're starting to get this shift from fluid to crystallized intelligence, but you mentioned that striver's curse. How does that fit in here?
Well, Brooks argues that these high achievers often face this, unique set of problems as they age because they've built their identities around success.
Right.
And when that success starts to wane, it can trigger this, existential crisis.
He talks about that woman, the highly successful woman who was just unhappy in her personal life.
Yes, she poured everything into her career and neglected her relationships and even her own well-being.
It's like that classic success addiction.
Tying their self-worth to their job performance, becoming a slave to these achievements, and it's not uncommon. We see it all the time with CEOs.
Right.
These high-powered individuals, so how do we break free from this?
That's the question, because it's got to be difficult to just kind of step off that treadmill, especially when, our culture is telling us to strive for more.
It's not easy, but Brooks offers some guidance here. He draws on, philosophy, spiritual traditions.
Okay.
This idea of detachment from Buddhism, letting go of clinging to these worldly achievements and possessions.
So not necessarily renouncing everything you worked for.
Right. Just recognizing the impermanence of that success and shifting your focus to something more enduring.
This reminds me of the satisfaction equation.
Yes.
It's like, getting that new car, it's exciting for a while, but then it fades and you just want the next thing.
Exactly. That hedonic treadmill we keep running and running, thinking more will make us happy. But, True satisfaction lies in stepping off that treadmill.
Finding contentment in what we have.
Exactly.
Brooks also draws parallels with the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas, who, he gave up worldly success to pursue that spiritual fulfillment.
Chipping away at those worldly attachments to find himself.
That's a radical shift.
But it's about prioritizing what truly matters. And I think that's a crucial message for anyone in this second half of life.
It's about recognizing our identities aren't fixed.
We can evolve and find new meaning and purpose that isn't tied to those external markers of success.
So it's not about giving up everything you've worked for. It's about using what we've learned to redefine what success means for us.
Brooks uses this great analogy. He compares our lives to this block of jade that an artist is shaping. We're not starting from scratch. We're refining what's already there, removing the excess to reveal this beautiful sculpture within.
So removing attachments and desires that don't serve us?
Exactly, the habits we need to let go of.
So this sounds less like a midlife crisis and more like a midlife opportunity.
I like that it is.
We might not be at our peak fluid intelligence, but we have so much crystallized intelligence.
They draw on.
And Brooks offers advice on how to do this.
He does. He has exercises and strategies for addressing workaholism and, cultivating those meaningful relationships and even exploring spirituality.
That's what we're going to dive into next time.
Yeah.
I am interested in what he has to say about relationships because he talks a lot about social connection.
He does, especially as we age. Those connections are so crucial for well-being.
Makes sense. You could have all the success in the world, but without those connections, it can feel pretty empty.
Right, and he highlights this loneliness epidemic. It affects everyone, but it seems to be worse for high-achieving professionals.
Because they put work first.
Exactly, and that leads to isolation and disconnection.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it.
It is. They climb the ladder of success only to find themselves alone at the top.
So professional success doesn't equal social fulfillment.
He uses the example of Anthony Bourdain.
The chef.
Yes, he had it all, fame, success, a dream job traveling the world, but he struggled with loneliness and ultimately took his own life.
That's a powerful reminder.
It is that outward appearances can be deceiving. We need to prioritize those relationships.
Regardless of achievement.
Exact.
Okay, so Brooks emphasizes friendships outside of work connections where you can be yourself, share vulnerabilities.
Right, and engage in those, meaningful conversations.
But that takes work.
It does. As we get older, life gets busier. We fall into routines.
So you got to be intentional about it.
Reaching out, making time, prioritizing.
But not just spending time together, but how you spend that time.
Yeah, he encourages, deeper conversations about the big questions.
Happiness, purpose.
Spirituality instead of just surface level stuff.
It makes me think of that C.S. Lewis quote, "Friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, 'What, you too? I thought I was the only one.'"
I love that it's about finding those people who understand you.
Who get you.
Who share your values and make you feel less alone.
Now, Brooks does acknowledge that, building those close friendships can be harder for men.
It can be.
He mentions that men tend to build friendships through activities.
Right, shared activities, whereas women connect more through emotional sharing.
So that difference can lead to men feeling more isolated.
Especially if those friendships were built around work or hobbies they no longer do.
And he mentions men's sheds, again, as a good model for creating space for men to connect.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing that vulnerability.
Right. It's about giving them a place to work on projects together, fostering that sense of camaraderie.
Okay, so we need to be proactive and create opportunities.
Yes. Especially as our lives change and our social circles evolve.
And this isn't just about making new friends, right?
No, it's about strengthening the relationships you already have.
Especially with loved ones.
He talks about having a core job in those relationships.
Okay.
It's that idea that we need to actively contribute to the well-being of our loved ones.
To their happiness.
Not just be present, but invest in them, understand their needs, help them grow.
So it's not enough to just, show up for dinner.
Right. You have to be truly present, engaged, actively contributing.
And remember that exercise he suggests.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking about the 3 things you most want for your loved ones and evaluate how you're doing at fostering those things.
I love that exercise.
It makes you think, are you just saying you want them to be happy, or are you actually contributing to their happiness?
It's about action, not just good intention.
This is a lot. Detach from success. Build your Aspen Grove. Embrace vulnerability. Be present in your relationships. It can feel overwhelming.
It can be, but it's a journey. It's gradual, not an overnight transformation.
And he acknowledges it takes effort.
It does, but it's worth it, and you don't have to do it all at once.
He uses the analogy of fishing in a falling tide.
Oh, yeah.
It seems kind of counterintuitive.
He learned from a fisherman that the best time to fish is when the tide is going out quickly, because it churns up the water.
Oh, so more opportunities to catch fish.
Exactly.
So it's about embracing those periods of change in our lives, because that's when the most growth can occur.
Exactly. He calls them liminality, these periods of transition.
That in-between space.
Where you're not quite who you were, but not yet who you're becoming.
It can be uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. Brooks describes feeling this way when he left his job in D.C. to move to Massachusetts.
What was that like for him?
He felt like he was living in two worlds, mentally, still in his old life, but trying to adjust to the new one.
Did he like it?
He said his signature even changed. It was like he was impersonating someone else.
So like an identity crisis?
It can be, but it's also a time for growth and transformation.
He points out that most people, when they look back on those transitions, they ultimately view them as positive.
Right. The fading effect bias, those unpleasant feelings fade, but the positive outcomes stay with us.
So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It's often those challenging transitions that help us clarify our purpose
Okay.
and find deeper meaning in life, and some struggle is necessary for personal growth.
So we shouldn't fear those times, but see them as opportunities.
A transformation, exactly.
And we don't have to go through it alone.
We have our aspen grove, our wisdom and our faith to guide us.
And we'll talk more about that next time.
We will.
But Brooks encourages us to view these transitions not as midlife crises, but opportunities.
For growth renewal and even that professional reset.
He talks about his grandfather who quit his job during World War II, moved his family to Chicago with no plan.
It was risky.
But he found a fulfilling new path as dean of students and a theology professor.
And he was in his 40s.
So it's never too late.
To make a change and find that new path that aligns with your interests and values, and Brooks actually provides a 3-part exercise for navigating this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So first, you got to identify your marshmallow.
Your marshmallow.
It's a reference to that famous Stanford marshmallow experiment.
Where kids had to delay gratification.
Exactly. The ones who could resist eating the marshmallow immediately got 2 later, and they showed greater self-control and achieved more in life.
Okay, so we need to apply this to our careers.
We need to find our long-term marshmallow, that ultimate goal, the thing that brings us fulfillment, and then delay gratification.
So have a vision for your future self.
Exactly, and make choices that align with that, even if it means sacrifice in the present.
He talks about jumping off a cliff into the ocean.
Yes.
He stood there, looking down, and felt that fear.
But he jumped.
He took the leap of faith.
He listened to that young cliff jumper who said, "Don't think, dude. Just jump."
And that's what Brooks is telling us to do with our careers.
Exactly. Take that leap, even if it's scary.
So it's not about being reckless, but taking calculated risks.
Following your passions, being open to new possibilities.
And he even gives us questions to ask ourselves.
He does, what will you commit to doing in the next month, 6 months?
Year.
What will be the first fruits of that commitment?
Exactly. No more procrastinating.
Time to jump, but we don't have to do it alone.
We have our aspen grove, our wisdom, and even our faith to guide us.
And that's what we'll be exploring next time in part 2 of our deep dive into From Strength to Strength.
Welcome back to our deep dive into From Strength to Strength.
Picking up where we left off, Brooks argues that, strong social connections, those are crucial for well-being, especially as we get older.
Makes sense. It's like you could achieve everything you ever wanted professionally, but without those strong relationships, it could all feel kind of empty.
He calls these connections our aspen grove, this network of relationships that gives us support, meaning, purpose.
Yeah, I like that aspen grove.
He also highlights, the loneliness epidemic.
Oh yeah, doesn't that affect everyone?
It does, but it seems particularly prevalent among high-achieving professionals.
Why is that?
They often prioritize work over relationships, and that leads to that isolation, that disconnection.
So it's like that reminder that professional success doesn't automatically equal social fulfillment.
Yeah, in fact, that pursuit of success can sometimes lead us to neglect those very relationships that bring us happiness.
He uses I think, a really tragic example of Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, the chef.
Yeah, he had it all right. Fame, success, his dream job of traveling the world.
It seemed like it.
But he struggled with loneliness.
And ultimately took his own life.
That's a really stark reminder that outward appearances can be deceiving.
It is.
and that we need to prioritize relationships no matter what we've achieved.
Brooks emphasizes cultivating those friendships outside of work, those connections where you can be yourself.
Where you can let your guard down.
Exactly. Share your vulnerabilities. Have those meaningful conversations.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's not always easy to do, especially as we get older, things get busy, we move, we get stuck in our routines.
It takes effort to maintain.
So how do we do that?
Well, Brooks suggests, being intentional, making time for social activities, and prioritizing those relationships.
Yeah, it's not just about spending time with people, but it's also how you spend that time, right?
The quality of those conversations matters.
Ah.
He encourages, those deeper conversations about the big things.
Life, happiness, purpose, all that.
Spirituality, instead of just staying on the surface.
Yeah. I think that's what C.S. Lewis was getting at when he said, friendship is born at that moment. When one person says to another, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one."
It's about finding those people who get you.
Who share your values and who just help you to feel less alone in the world. Brooks does point out that this can be harder for men.
It can.
And he says that's because men tend to bond over activities,
Shared activities.
while women tend to connect more through sharing their emotions,
Exactly. And that difference can lead to men feeling more isolated
especially as they get older.
if their primary friendships were built around, work or hobbies that they no longer do.
It's like they lose that connection. He brings up men's sheds again as a good model for giving men that space to connect.
It's not about forcing them to be vulnerable.
But it gives them something to do together.
Provides that shared activity, camaraderie, and over time, that can lead to those deeper bonds.
So we have to be proactive in a way,
Yes, create opportunities for those connections.
especially as life changes.
And as our social circles change.
So it's not just about making new friends, right?
Yeah.
It's also about strengthening the relationships we already have.
Especially with our loved ones.
Brooks talks about that core job in our relationships. It's that idea that we need to contribute to their well-being.
To their happiness.
It's more than just being present.
You have to invest in them, understand their needs, and help them grow.
So it's not enough to just, show up for dinner once a week.
You have to be present, engaged, contributing. Remember that exercise he suggests?
The three things, yeah.
Think about those three things you want most for the people you love, and then ask yourself, how much are you investing in those things?
It makes you really think, like, am I just saying I want them to be happy? Or am I actually doing things to contribute to that happiness?
It's about action, not just good intentions.
This is a lot.
It is.
Detach from success, build your aspen grove, embrace vulnerability, be present in your relationships. It's overwhelming.
It can be, but it's a journey, right? A gradual change.
He acknowledges that it takes work.
Effort, commitment. But it's worth it, and you don't have to do it all at once.
And he uses a good analogy here, fishing in a falling tide,
Yeah.
which seems counterintuitive at first.
He learned from this experienced fisherman that the best time to fish is when the tide is going out quickly,
Why?
because it churns up the water, creates more opportunities to catch fish.
So it's about embracing those times of change, because that's when the most growth happens.
He calls those periods of transition liminality.
That in-between space where you're not quite who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming.
It can be uncomfortable.
Disorienting even.
Brooks talks about feeling this way when he left his job in D.C. and moved to Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, what was that like for him?
He felt like, he was living in two worlds.
Oh wow.
Like mentally, he was still connected to that old life, but trying to adjust to this new one.
He said it was so bad his signature even changed. It was like he was impersonating someone else.
It can feel like an identity crisis.
It can.
But Brooks emphasizes that liminality, while challenging, is a time of great potential.
For growth and transformation.
Exactly.
He points out that most people, when they look back on those tough transitions, they see them as positive.
There's a name for that.
What is it?
The fading effect bias. The bad feelings fade, but the good stuff, the growth, the new perspective, the relationships, those things stay.
So it's true what they say. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And those challenging transitions, they often help us clarify our purpose, find a deeper meaning.
So those times, those liminal moments, they're not something to fear.
They're opportunities.
Opportunities for transformation.
And we don't have to go through it alone. Brooks talks about how those relationships, they provide a sense of stability and grounding.
It's important to remember that this too shall pass, that we've handled challenges before, and we'll get through this one too.
And Brooks encourages us to view these transitions not as midlife crises, but as, chances for growth and renewal.
And maybe even a professional reset, like we talked about earlier.
Right. He gives the example of his grandfather, who quit his job during World War II,
Wow,
moved his family to Chicago, no plan.
that's a big risk.
It was, but he found a new path. He became dean of students and a theology professor.
He sounds like a very interesting man.
He was, and he was in his 40s when he did it.
So it really is never too late to make a change.
To find that path that truly aligns with who you are, remember that 3-part exercise Brooks provides.
Oh, yeah, for navigating that professional reset.
Mm.
You said it starts with identifying your marshmallow.
Exactly.
Now, I got to know, what does a marshmallow have to do with changing careers?
He's referencing that Stanford marshmallow experiment.
Oh, right, where they tested kids' ability to delay gratification.
Exactly. And the kids who resisted eating the marshmallow, they ended up doing better in life. They showed greater self-control.
So we need to apply that to our careers.
Brooks says we have to identify our long-term marshmallow, that ultimate goal, the thing that will bring us that deep satisfaction, and be willing to maybe delay gratification to get it.
It's about having a vision for the future.
Exactly, and making choices that align with that vision, even if it means making sacrifices right now.
He uses that analogy of jumping off a cliff into the ocean.
Oh, yeah, he talks about standing on the edge, looking down, and feeling that fear, that hesitation.
This is crazy feeling.
But he jumped.
He took the leap of faith.
He listened to that young cliff jumper who said, "Don't think, dude, just jump."
That's what he's encouraging us to do with our professional lives.
Take the leap even when it feels scary, uncertain.
So not being reckless, but taking those calculated risks, following those passions.
Legs open.
He even gives us specific questions to ask ourselves.
What will you commit to doing in the next month, 6 months, a year?
What will those first steps look like?
It's about taking action, setting goals, making a plan. No more waiting.
It's time to jump. But we don't have to do it alone.
We've got our aspen grove, our wisdom, and even our faith to guide us through it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into From Strength to Strength. So in the last 2 parts, we've talked about that striver's curse and, how to detach from success addiction and build those meaningful relationships as we age. But now I want to talk about faith and spirituality and what role they play in this second half of life.
Yeah, Brooks gets really personal in this part of the book. He talks about his own journey with faith and how it's helped him deal with those challenges that we all face. And he knows this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
But he encourages everyone to be open to that spiritual dimension of life, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, I think he even said that he was hesitant to include this chapter in the book.
He was worried it might turn off some readers.
But ultimately, he decided to share his experience.
He did, because he thought it might be helpful for people, who are struggling with similar questions.
And it's a really interesting journey. He talks about how his interest in spirituality actually grew as he got older, which I think is kind of surprising because, he was a skeptic for a long time.
Yeah, he said he started to feel drawn to those big questions about meaning and purpose and, the nature of reality. All those questions he used to think weren't important.
Yeah, he mentions stumbling upon the writings of Paramahansa Yogananda.
Oh, yeah, the Hindu guru.
As a young man.
Mm-hmm.
And he was fascinated by those stages of life in the Hindu tradition,
Yeah.
the ashramas.
Yes, and particularly Vanaprastha.
The stage where you detach from those worldly pursuits and focus on, seeking wisdom and spiritual growth.
It ties in really well with that idea of shedding attachments that we've been talking about.
Exactly. And Brooks being, Brooks, he wanted to learn more about this concept.
Of course he did.
But he couldn't find much information in English.
So what did he do?
Well, he traveled to India,
No way.
deep into the countryside, to meet a spiritual teacher named Acharya.
Wow, it's like something out of a movie.
So what was that encounter like?
Brooks describes, walking into this very humble home, and Acharya is surrounded by these silent devotees. And he just greets him with namaste and says, "I've been waiting for you." And Brooks just felt this immediate sense of peace.
That's amazing.
It was a really powerful moment.
So what did they talk about?
Well, Brooks shared his struggles with the striver's curse, his anxieties about aging and decline, and, his desire for a more fulfilling path.
Yeah.
And Acharya explained Vanaprastha in more detail, emphasizing the importance of letting go of ambition and attachment as you get older.
Makes sense.
Shifting your focus from achieving
Yeah.
to contributing, from external validation to inner peace.
It really does align with everything we've been talking about.
It does, embracing that second curve,
Yeah.
letting go of what no longer serves you, finding new purpose.
Brooks was so moved by this encounter
I can imagine.
that he continues to study with Acharya.
That's amazing.
But, he makes it clear that this doesn't mean we all have to travel to India and, become Hindu ascetics.
Of course not.
It's about finding what works for each of us.
Exactly, exploring those different traditions and practices with an open mind.
He even shares a story about his wife, Esther,
Oh, yeah.
who helped him reconnect with his own Catholic faith.
He calls Esther his guru.
That's really beautiful.
It's a reminder that we can find guidance and support in unexpected places.
And Brooks acknowledges that faith and spirituality can be such a source of comfort and meaning.
And resilience, especially when we face those difficult times.
He mentions there's actually research showing that religious and spiritual adults tend to be happier and healthier.
They do both physically and mentally.
It's interesting, and, he encourages us to be open to exploring this side of things, even if we've had bad experiences with religion in the past.
Yeah, you don't have to blindly accept what you were taught.
We can approach it with a more critical eye.
Asking questions, seeking understanding, finding what resonates with us.
He talks about this kind of childish, cartoon version of faith that we need to let go of.
Make space for a more mature understanding.
So it's about shedding those preconceived notions and seeing things in a new light.
It is.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into from strength to strength. We've covered so much.
We talked about the striver's curse, detaching from that success addiction, the power of vulnerability, and the importance of our relationships.
Yeah, and we explored embracing that second curve, finding our marshmallow and, even taking those leaps of faith.
We talked about detachment, vanaprastha, and the transformative power of faith and spirituality.
So many great takeaways.
And the key takeaway, I think, is that aging isn't about decline, it's about evolution.
It's about shedding those old attachments.
Embracing those new possibilities and finding deeper meaning.
Brooks really encourages us to embrace this next chapter with courage and grace and a sense of adventure.
He does.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, we'll leave you with this final question from Arthur Brooks. What will your legacy be in your second curve?
It's a powerful question.
What impact do you want to have on the world? What wisdom do you want to share? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
Something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into From Strength to Strength. We hope you found it insightful and helpful as you navigate your own second curve